Hello and welcome to Big Picture. I am Vishal Dahiya, and today we will talk about rising oceans and sinking cities. Now, oceans act as a sponge for the ill effects of the climate change by absorbing heat and CO2 generated by greenhouse gas emissions. However, these same oceans are likely to unleash their wrath on a global scale. According to a draft report of United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, destructive changes have already been set in motion. The draft report says that even with most optimistic emission reduction scenario, by the year 2050, many low-lying megacities and small island nations will experience extreme sea level events every year. The report also says that the Big Four, that is United States of America, China, India and European Union, will face most devastating fallout of the ocean and ice-related impacts of climate change. IPCC has meanwhile said that final report will be released in September after a thorough discussion with all the stakeholders. For more on this, we are joined by a distinguished panel of guests today in the studio. Let me begin by introducing these guests to you. And we have with us Professor C.K. Varshney, environmentalist and former Dean of School of Environmental Studies from JNU. We also have with us Mr. Dilip Sinha, former Special Secretary of the Government of India on International Organizations and Environmental Diplomacy. And we're also joined by Mr. Tarun Gopalakrishnan from CSU, who is their Deputy Program Manager on Climate. Let me begin with you, Professor Varshney. This paints a very bleak picture and a scary one as well.
That's true, that the kind of problem that we are going to face, in fact we are already facing, because you see the number of cyclones that have come and so on are very clear indication of things to come in future. The point is that the glaciers are melting in a very, very rapid way. 400 million tons of ice is melting every year from last 10 years or so. And you can imagine the kind of volume of water that is increasing. And also we must understand the little science that as the temperature increases, the volume of water increases also. So put these things together and also you will see that there is a global change in the climate, which means that the pattern of rainfall, the pattern of wind flow are all changing very drastically. As a result, the surges and many other changes are taking place. You have rightly said that oceans are serving as a sponge for taking up carbon dioxide. So this is changing the chemistry of the ocean also in a big way. So chemistry change, and also oceans from last 10 years are facing heat wave. I mean, you might be surprised to know that what are these heat waves? Heat waves are those situations where the surface temperature of the ocean remains above the normal for consecutive 2 to 5 days, and I think their number and intensity is increasing. They are particularly more frequent and likely to become very, very frequent in years to come. So considering all this, the low-lying areas that we have, you see India has got 7,500 kilometer long coastline, and many of our cities and mega cities have low-lying areas. The poor people largely occupy these critical habitats. So I think because of the sea level rise, they will be forced to migrate hinterland, which is going to create a very serious problem. You have rightly said a very large population is going to be evacuated, which we call as ecological refugees. You must understand that whenever a small population really migrates from one place to another, creates political upheaval, which really have reverberations around the world. And when such a large population is going to migrate, no government in the world is prepared nor have even assessed that what does it mean and how to tackle a problem of this kind.
Okay, and specifically when you are mentioning, governments and nations as well, their role does become important. In fact, the draft report, and I'd like to bring in Mr. Sinha here, the draft report clearly says that the Big Four, that is the United States of India, China, United States of America, China, India and European Union, all these four will bear the brunt of this particular, this particular evolution as a climate change.
Well, actually, these four, in one way, you can say are the biggest emitters, although India is not a major emitter in terms of overall quantity or even in terms of per capita emissions. But the fact is that because of the emissions of these four major countries or groups of countries, it is the smaller countries, it's these small island states, that will be the major victims of climate change. Some countries like Kiribati, for example, expect to get wiped out and they're looking for land elsewhere. And then low-lying cities like Jakarta has just announced that they'll probably move the capital out of Java and move on to Borneo. India also has large deltaic regions and coastal regions which will be affected by this. But as I said, India's gross emissions are still very low. The real problem is that China's emissions are extremely high. China's total emissions are actually twice that of the number 2, which is the US. And in terms of even per capita emissions, China's emissions are now touching the average emissions per capita of the OECD countries, which is the group of the rich countries, the developed countries. So whereas India's per capita emission is still a fraction of the average of the industrial countries, China's has gone up high. And it's only now that China is waking up, because China has seen some very bad flooding this year. And China has said that from its Paris Agreement target of peaking at around 2030, it may peak at around 2025. Now that will be, I suppose, a major gain for everybody. But China should have peaked a long time back, because there's no reason for China to have continued these very high emission levels of as high as 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide.
But Mr. Sinha, draft report also says that these, predictions which the draft report is making about events in 2050, events in 2100 will happen if even if we meet the targets of capping the emissions, capping the rise in temperature as well. So much more needs to be done rather than just meeting these targets which have been set.
Well, absolutely. We see the Paris Agreement actually did away with the capping and the fixed targets procedure or system that's adopted by the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol, the first Kyoto Protocol phase between 2005 and 2012 had given targets of reducing emissions by industrialized countries by 5%. And Kyoto Protocol 2 had given targets of minus 18% reduction by the industrialized countries, but that never came through. And instead, there was this pledge and review system that Paris Agreement introduced. And as you rightly say, even if the Paris Agreement targets, or what I call INDCs, the internationally determined contributions, are met, they will not meet the targets. And the increase in temperature, although the Paris Agreement says that the temperature increase should not be more than 2 degrees Celsius, hopefully 1.5 degrees Celsius, the fact is that even if all countries meet their Paris Agreement goals, the temperature increase might go up to as high as 3 degrees Celsius.
Okay, so much more needs to be done out there. Let me bring in Tarun here, and we'll go back to Professor Varshney on what needs to be done, and we'll come back to you as well, Mr. Sinha. But Tarun here, first and foremost, how do you look at this draft report, and is the situation that serious and that bad as it is depicted out there, according to you?
Well, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has a reputation for being a very tell the facts as they are scientific body. In fact, the procedure for the approval of the reports makes sure that there's very little that is politically controversial that makes it through the report. So in fact, if you're trying to figure out whether things are better than they seem or worse than they seem, it's a good bet that the IPCC's reports tend to underplay or at least present the situation in very just the facts terms. Now, I think the situation is extremely serious. Even just reading the bare facts of the report, it's clear that as Dr. Sinha pointed out, the current pledges of countries are taking us towards 3 degrees. We need to be at 2 degrees. We actually need to be at 1.5 degrees if we don't want to lose a bunch of island nations, which is why island nations fought to include that 1.5 target in the Paris Agreement, but we're set to blow past that target in something like 10 years, maybe 12 years. Now, the focus then has to shift. So if we are accepting, and there's no if about it, we have to accept that a lot of the mitigation action that should have been taken in the past 10 or 20 or maybe 30 years has failed to occur, which means that we are now in a world where we have to adapt.
Okay.
Now, the costs of that adaptation are extremely uncertain. The United Nations Environment Program estimated a couple of years ago that the costs ranged in hundreds of billions of US dollars per year. And under the Paris Agreement, the commitment to finance is $100 billion from developed to developing countries each year. And that commitment is not being met by something like 50 or 60 billion dollars. So we're not even reaching $100 billion of finance traveling from developed to developing countries, and now we're at a point where we expect to incur hundreds of billions of dollars in adaptation costs each year. Now, what I like about this report is that it makes very clear that these costs are not limited to developing countries. That was the scary picture emerging from a lot of previous reports, that developing countries were the ones worst hit. We now know that apart from developing countries, developed economies like the US as well as Europe are also going to be hit by this phenomenon, which hopefully, one would hope, pushes political action on this front. But that remains to be seen.
Okay, that's quite interesting out there as well. And Professor Varshney, as you know, Tarun also put it, and both of you said, and most of the people who are reading this report are also emphasizing on the fact that there is no if and but here. Let's face the facts. But also, this report, brings everybody, all those nations, developing as well as developed, on the same platform by pointing out to these big four, which includes, developed countries like United States of America and European Union nations as well. So what do we need to do from here onwards to at least go ahead and bring down the level of threat a little bit?
Let me just make 2 points very quickly. Number one, that the Paris Agreement and the kind of rigor that we were expecting is losing its force. United States President Donald Trump has given no show at the G7 climate meet. Not only that, United States, even of late, China is losing its grip and the rigor on climate issues. They are opening up new coal mines. Even their pollution control is now slackening. This is largely because of the trade war that has erupted. So to keep the things going, they are really becoming little more relaxed. You see the Brazil situation, where large areas of forest, or
the Amazon forest
forest is on fire. Not only there, Bolivia also, and not only Bolivia, in Australia, as well as in Canada and many other places. So I think the global warming and the issues that are related to the warming of the globe are such that the glaciers are melting. We must reckon that there is a close relationship between water, land and the cryosphere. Now this relationship has not been adequately addressed or appreciated globally by the governments as large. You see, the climate change issues have largely arrested our attention to the emission alone, without really bothering about the implications that it has on other systems. Oceans cover 3/4 of the globe, and large number of our fishermen and our economy is dependent upon ocean. Because of the warming, because of the change in chemistry, because of the pollution which is world over, because of the oil spill, the oceans have been very badly abused everywhere, both in the developing coast as well as the coast of the developing countries. And therefore, the situation is so complex that it is not a question of maintaining the pledge that we have made in Paris, but we have to be very aggressive to come up with more aggressive cuts and resolve, and at a much shorter period of time. A very dramatic change has to be there in our system of thinking, and it has to percolate through the society and should be taken care of by all governments on a war footing. Governments are not ready to face the challenge that has been posed by the rising tide of the ocean and the ocean line. There is hardly any preparation by any country around the world which can really say that they are making their coast safe. Netherlands, let's take the case of United States and more particularly of Manhattan. It is one of the seriously threatened area, and the technocrats are giving a false hope that we will be able to raise a wall and this and that. But 1 meter rise, which is expected by the turn of the century, will simply wash off all those things that we are really investing there to protect it. So I think the seriousness of this need to be understood in a proper manner, and adequately we have to prepare ourselves to face this challenge. Now, 2 things need to be done, as you said. One, that it goes without saying that oceans are going to increase further. Whatever we may do, even if you are at 1.5, which is impossible to achieve, oceans are going to rise. And therefore, it is time for us to prepare that how do we take care of the migrating population?
Okay.
What kind of efforts we need to do? What kind of estimates we require to do? So I think these are some of the things in which our governments have to engage right now to save the calamity which is going to take place without any preparation.
Okay, Mr. Sinha, do you agree, as Professor Varshney is pointing out, that time has come for us to not only meet the pledges which are made in the global climate change summits, but go beyond those pledges, take to think of out-of-box solutions out here, commit ourselves to this particular cause?
Absolutely. I mean, apart from adaptation, which is very important, which means to prepare for the impending calamity, we also have to try and see if we can avert or at least delay the calamity. And in one respect, for example, our country is doing well in terms of promoting non-fossil fuels. And we have already exceeded the target, and we are now raising the target.
And joining the Solar Alliance,
absolutely,
putting a focus on solar energy, all those are steps on that?
Yes, those are positive steps, and we have already met our target of solar installed capacity, and we are now increasing that target. So on that front, we are doing very well. But on the other hand, there are certain areas where I think we can do better. And one is that in our development program, road transport is being considerable importance. The automobile industry is right now in a bit of trouble, but we should allow, instead of allowing it to become a sunset industry, we are now giving it some assistance to help it revive again because of jobs. So that's a problem all over the world, that because of loss of jobs, whether it is Donald Trump in the US or it is China or it is India, we feel that we have to keep alive certain industries which are actually harmful for the environment. Now, we all know that railways, for example, we already have an excellent network of railways, and they are far less polluting and they occupy far less space than road transport, and we already have a network. If we upgrade that network, we can meet our development needs much more cheaply, and also in a much more environment friendly manner than through road transport. So we have to calibrate our development programs to ensure that we do not follow and take the same trajectory as the industrialized countries.
Okay.
We have to do better than that.
Okay, we have to do better than that. Tarun, out there, in terms of what needs to be done, one or two aspects which are coming in out is going ahead and planning for it, maybe try to delay the calamity, and also, calibrate all our developmental needs with respect to what we are facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd add another element to that, which is that we are doing well compared to a lot of other countries. It's of course difficult to say when the globe is failing to meet this challenge at such a miserable level. But India, comparatively, in terms of its targets under the Paris Agreement, as well as how far we are to achieving those targets under the Paris Agreement, we are doing relatively well. Now, what we need to see on the basis of this report, when we hear that we are going to be one of the worst affected countries by this problem, we need to see more of a diplomatic effort to make sure that the action taken in India is matched abroad. Now, for example, the International Solar Alliance, there was a lot of hope around the fact that would be used to spread solar power around the world. Now, we are doing pretty well on solar power. We're doing well on renewable energy generally, although we could be doing better. But what really needs to happen is to use our own action to pressure other governments to act. We need to take more of a leadership role in terms of the diplomacy on this issue, because it's we were not the biggest contributors to the problem, but it's becoming increasingly clear that we are going to be the worst affected or among the worst affected by the problem, which means that we need to put in far more of a diplomatic effort to trying to get comparable commitments from across the globe, starting this year when countries are supposed to update their targets under the Paris Agreement.
Okay, Professor Varshney, India needs to go ahead and take that pole position on these aspects and also ensure that our actions are, reverberated across the world and repeated by them, the other nations as well, at par.
Absolutely, because the sustainable development goals to which we are committed by 2030 are going to be difficult to achieve if this kind of a situation is going to prevail. And what, we are doing enough, and we are doing much more than what we have committed, but even that is not enough. The question is that we have a problem of a kind and a magnitude which requires much more aggressive effort that need to be done, for which I think all countries have to really tighten their belt and join the team, which seems to be very difficult. You see, the president of Brazil is very much against the kind of climate change resistance or so on and so forth. He's all bent upon development, and therefore this is happening. Similarly, the Prime Minister of Canada is also like that. So where the policies are that let us go whole hog for the development. Now this kind of a scenario is prevailing and is growing after Paris. That is very amazing and very disturbing. And unless these things are brought, and this report is not going to be discussed by the forthcoming meeting on September 26th, because the finalization of report is going to be a week later, and therefore the governments will not have chance to really devote and apply their mind as to how to deal with a problem of this kind and prepare individually in their country national level to meet this requirement and to face this growing challenge, a far more serious challenge that we have. So we have a challenge of drought, high temperature, as well as we have a challenge of shrinking cities and sinking cities.
And floods as well. That is the reason why the oceans are rising and cities are under threat. Final concluding comments from you, Mr. Sinha, on how it needs to be done. As Tarun pointed out, India needs to take a pole position out there, and Professor Varshney is pointing out we'll have to think out of the box solutions. Also, we'll have to, you said that we'll have to calibrate our developmental needs. That seems quite a lot, but is it achievable? And is it achievable in that time frame?
Well, there was a report of an interim report of a panel of the IPCC last year, which said that if action is taken immediately and serious action is taken, then it is possible to limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But that means action has to be taken now. Now, there I entirely agree with Tarun that we should take the lead in this and ensure that whatever we are doing is used as an example for us to put pressure upon other countries, especially the two main polluters, which is China and the US, who also have a very cynical attitude towards climate change, that they have to do much more. But of course, by setting an example ourselves, because we ourselves are victims of climate change, and there is no reason why we cannot set an example for the rest of the world.
Okay, Tarun, final words from you on the threat of the climate change is quite, seems quite real now with all these facts and figures. So time for action, and strong action now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the action, when we say action in this country, we tend to believe that the action can only be taken at the national government level. I think the national government is very important to this struggle, but the national government should work on empowering local communities, moving funds towards, say, coastal communities who are going to be particularly vulnerable to this challenge, and empowering them with the resources to start planning now for the uncertainty associated with the world in the next 50 to 100 years. So yeah, invest in communities starting now.
Okay, so there it is. As our panelists have pointed out, the facts put in public domain by the draft report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change clearly point out the amount and the range of threat there to mankind, to humanity, not only from one nation, but all of us. So looks like all of us, individuals, societies and nations, will have to come together and find a solution and act now. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.